Let's just jump right in, Brian, if you are ready to roll here with the rush side of things. So Notre Dame's rush defense versus Purdue's rush offense.
I got 221 there. I think I got this. I think I got this all figured out today.
Yes, and of course we have to mention the fact that Purdue's starting running back Zander Horvath is out for this game.
He's a local kid, correct?
He went to Marion. He went to Mishawaka
Did you coach against him by chance?
I did. Yes, he was a man amongst boys. There was a couple of still shots I still remember to this day in the newspaper of him like running the football, and his arms were just the size of most people's heads. I mean, just a massive human being. And he took a shot going to Purdue as a walk-on, and he was rewarded for all of his hard work, and now he's the starter. And so, kudos to that young man for his hard work and everything. He was almost impossible to bring down in high school. I do remember that. He's one of those kids, if you didn't hit him low, good luck.
So what you're saying is Marcus Freeman will not be calling you with tips on how to stop Zander Horvath in the future.
No, he won't. He will not be calling me. I was not the defensive coordinator, though, so I'm going to definitely pass that off. But he's a hard runner. And
it does hurt Purdue's offense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're not much of a running team anay.
I would have loved to see him play, though. I mean, how cool would that be to come back and play inside Notre Dame Stadium as a local kid? All of that, right? All those storylines. Mm-hmm. But he's injured, and I do think it hurts this team because their second string running back is number 22, right?
King Doru,
watching the film.
That Notre Dame actually recruited a little bit coming out of high school in Texas.
Okay, but he's a way different runner than Zander Horvath. Way different runner. So they don't have to worry about kind of that thunder and lightning combination like they would have had to worry about. Now they're just worried about.
Really had to respect the box when Zander Horvath was in the game. Not an explosive athlete, but a good athlete. A big kid, ran hard. There was a play, his touchdown run against Oregon State. Vince, you remember this play?
Yep.
It was a wildcat. He got hit in the backfield, just drove.
And he made a nice
move, But he just kind of drove, like high stepped it and just drove through the guy and got in the end zone. You're like, okay, that was a nice run right there, right?
Yes, yeah.
So it's definitely hurts them because what he brought to the table, again, those numbers right there are not sexy. Right. But the thing about it is Purdue just needs their run game, the way that their offense works. Again, we're not saying it's right or wrong, whatever. It's just what he does at Purdue, because you think Notre Dame's offensive line's not good. Purdue's isn't any better. The difference is Purdue's offensive line's playing to its potential. It's just not good.
Yeah.
Other than Gus Hartwig at center, they don't have a lot of the left guard transfer. Tyler Vitt is a decent player, but their tackles are not athletic. They're tough kids, but they're not explosive kids because they lack athleticism. And they can give up a lot of pressure. So you needed that big back in the middle to keep teams honest from the perimeter. And, Zander Horvath was averaging like 3.9 yards per carry. So, again, he wasn't like lighting the world on fire. But he was a hammer, and you had to respect that hammer. And I don't think that King Doru and Dylan Downing really provide that same sort of that hammer. Now, what they do provide, however, Vince, is I do think is a little bit more make you miss ability.
Yes.
I do think they bring more of that to the table. And
I agree.
So that makes it a little bit interesting because they like to throw screens to the backs and things like that. So, but from a run game standpoint, as you see, Purdue gives up a lot of tackles for loss. They don't run for many yards. Not many yards per attempt. They're not a great running team. And Notre Dame's numbers are bad because they got blasted against Florida State. Notre Dame's run defense was much better against Toledo.
Agreed.
Much better against Toledo.
Well, and the tackling was better. And I think that goes a long way, obviously, to fix these numbers because the tackling was atrocious against Florida State. And it was a lot better against Toledo. Look, and we've said it before, the defense took a step in the right direction from week 1 to week 2. And now, is there still room to improve? Absolutely. But they took a step. And if they continue to take steps like that, then this defense is going to be just fine. I'm not overly worried about the defense, but from a tackling standpoint, they got so much better from week 1 to week 2. I expect that to get even better in week 3. And I do not – looking at the numbers on paper, you give the edge to Purdue. I mean, just looking at these numbers, I mean, almost every one of Notre Dame's ranks is in triple digits except tackles for a loss. But I still give the edge to Notre Dame here because I still think that their front seven is going to be better than Purdue's offensive line. And I think that they're going to be able to penetrate and take away some of the things that Purdue wants to do in the run game. And so I still like Notre Dame in this matchup, but they have to continue to improve with their tackling and with their contain on the outside, et cetera. Well, the things that hurt them against Florida State didn't necessarily hurt them against Toledo,
right?
But we've seen it, and I just don't want to see it again, if that makes sense.
You know, and you look at those numbers, and again, we're early enough in the season where a big play or a bad game can inflate numbers. And if you look at Notre Dame's run game production, 2 plays, right? They've given up 399 yards so far. Wait a minute, I think I did that correctly. It's 396 yards, right? And trying to do the math here in my head, 156 of that was on 2 plays. You know, that's to the point you made is they were both missed tackles near the line.
Right.
That has to get cleaned up. Now, Purdue doesn't have the kind of backs that Toledo and Florida State had, especially Florida State. The big thing here, however, too, is their line's not as good as those 2 lines that Notre Dame's face. And that's not saying a whole lot because I didn't think either one of those lines are great. This is a really immobile Purdue offensive line. This is a game where Notre Dame should absolutely dominate in the trenches. And I think this is an area that's going to be important because Notre Dame has to basically tell Purdue, you cannot run the ball today.
Right.
We are going to dominate the run today. We're going to shut you down. We're going to penetrate. If you try to run, just anticipate it being a 2-yard loss. Force them to be a pass-heavy team. Because the thing, and my midweek musing is going to come up today. I'm going to have that later this afternoon. And in it, I talk about how a lot of these numbers that we look at from the Notre Dame defense, and I'm just going to quickly scroll through all of them just to give you a quick glance. We'll come back to the run game. These numbers right here, not good. Those numbers right there, not good. Those numbers right there at the top, yards per game and all that, not good, right? But here's the thing about this matchup. Those numbers kind of mask that Notre Dame's done a lot of really good things on defense. It's like 4 plays that they've given up and in a terrible decision in the third quarter to go to sort of a let's back off what we did. And they did it a little bit against Toledo this weekend. And Marcus Freeman say, look, we are not good enough on either side of the ball to call off the dogs up 8 or 18 or whatever. We got to keep attacking. And I think he's so concerned about the big play that they kind of back off at the end. Don't just coach your kids up because you look at that tackles for loss number right there. They're 7th in the country in tackles for loss, and they've done it both games. They've had a ton of negatives. They've been super disruptive. Absolutely. And if they dominate this matchup in the trenches, Vince, Purdue is going to have no chance to really run the football. Right. As long as, like you said, the tackling is better. You can't miss. And those are the big things. But this defense is super close to being dominant. And they're 6 – it's really about 8 plays in 2 games has just blown up their stats.
Right.
Is it, you know? And if you clean up – and they were all technical things for the most part. There was one play where it's like, yeah, that guy's just not real good, so I understand him getting beat. But other than that, it's been technical stuff.
Absolutely. And if you're just looking at numbers, so if we're just looking at it on paper, right, and we weren't paying attention to what we actually see on the football field, right? I'm zeroed in right now on tackles for loss and tackles for loss allowed. Okay, because obviously tackles for loss for Notre Dame, excellent, 7th in the country. Tackles for loss allowed by Purdue, 112th.
Right.
Those are the numbers that really stand out to me. You talked about Notre Dame being disruptive and doing what they do, at a high level. They've done that both games, right? They've been in the backfield. They have hurried the passer. They have, obviously succeeded in a tackles for loss situation, and Purdue is allowing those things to happen. And when those two forces combine, I like Notre Dame's chances here. And when you get behind the sticks and you're an offense that is a big play offense like Purdue is, right? It's going to force them to be one-dimensional. And when they're one-dimensional, they're not going to be as good. And Notre Dame is going to be able to get in the backfield and force the issue, I think. So I really think that tackles for loss number is the thing that stands out to me when we're talking about the run game. if Notre Dame can continue what they're doing and Purdue continues what they're doing, Notre Dame shuts down this run game, period.
Well, let's put this number to perspective, Vince. 19 tackles for loss in 2 games is 9.5 tackles for loss per game. You average that out over the course of a 13-game season, which is what Notre Dame has played all but last year. The highest that gets them to 123.5 tackles for loss. Okay. Notre Dame's highest tackles for loss number of the Brian Kelly era is 92.
So in the last 10-ish years, 92.
Yeah, yes, 92. That was in 2019. They would blow so far past that at this rate. Like it's an exceptional number. And that's the thing is when I look at it, I say, look, this defense is doing a lot of good things. There's just a couple things they got to clean up. That's the difference. The offense is just not playing well up front. They're just not playing well. The defense is playing well in a lot of ways. They're just making mistakes that they shouldn't be making. Whether it's a guy getting grabbed beyond a pass interference, where you're in position, you're in great position, you've done everything you need to do. Trust yourself and trust your coaching and make that play. You're in the hole. You're where you need to be when the ball's coming. Come to balance and make the tackle, right? Take the proper angle on, you're going in motion. They're going to run a wheel route. Take the proper over-the-top motion. Don't give up a 66-yard gain. Those are things that are correctable. And that's why I have not been as down on the defense. And, and then when you talk about this matchup, one of the things I'm seeing a lot this week from Notre Dame fans, and I get the frustration. This isn't a shot at y'all or anybody else. I don't think Notre Dame can beat Purdue because Notre Dame's offensive line I don't trust. Well, you clearly haven't watched Purdue yet this season because their offensive line is not good. And that number that you just pointed to, Vince, dang it, I keep getting the pointing direction wrong. Is an example of it. I mean, they've given up 16 tackles for loss in 2 games against 2 really bad defenses. You know what I mean? Like Notre Dame has faced some NFL players in the opener. I'm pretty certain that Purdue hasn't really faced any NFL guys yet.
Not from UConn.
Yes, and not from Oregon State either. That's just not – I mean, Oregon State's defense last year was not good, and it's not a whole lot better now, to be honest with you. Now they battled and scrapped and those type of things against, that even last week when they beat Hawaii, they gave up 27 points. Oregon State did, and they gave up 33.3 points last year. UConn's, we've talked about how bad UConn is. I mean, they're in 3 games, they're giving up 44 points a game. They gave up 38 points to Flip and Holy Cross.
Right, exactly.
Right. They gave up 45 points to Fresno State. They gave up 49 points to Purdue. If Notre Dame had played Oregon State and UConn, we'd probably be having a different conversation about where Notre Dame is right now. It would mask the issues that Notre Dame has, is what it would do. And what it has done for Purdue is it has masked their biggest kryptonite on offense, which is their line. And that's why in this game, Notre Dame has to dominate. They have to be able to dominate with their front. They have to do to Purdue's run game what other teams have done to Notre Dame's run game, which is shut it down with 4 and 5. They have to. Because if they have to start committing resources from the third level or from the outside to the run game, that's when the pass game gets even more dangerous. So this is a huge matchup. We've talked all along about how good we think this Notre Dame defensive line is going to be. And with a few exceptions, it's been everything I thought it would be. I mean, they were super disruptive against Toledo this past week. They were pretty good against Florida State with the exception of you just got to finish on the quarterback. We think they're going to get Jordan Patelho back this week. I think this is the matchup that this is the week you have to show that you're as good as we think you can be, because you have to take over this matchup. And if you can do that and make Purdue basically play Purdue's kind of a one-dimensional team anyway, but take away where they haven't, you have to be now. That to me is going to be the key to this matchup, which is why I give Notre Dame the advantage in this matchup.
Well, and the bottom line is Notre Dame just has to finish. I mean, I thought that they have controlled the line of scrimmage 2.5, 3/4 of each game, to be honest with you. And it's the fourth quarter that's bit them in the butt. Yeah. So they need to finish. They need a complete game up front, frankly. And this is a great opportunity to do that. If they can do that, then I'm not in any way worried, right? Because they've gotten better week 1 to week 2. If they get better week 2 to week 3, that means they've had a complete game in week 3. I'm no longer worried about the defense, and especially bringing back Jordan Patelho. So I like this matchup for Notre Dame. I like it a lot.